Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive on Dopamine Detox. It's by Thibaut Meurisse. And it's all about getting our focus back in this world full of distractions.
Oh, yeah. You ever feel like you're just constantly, battling for control of your own attention?
All the time.
You're not alone. This book, it nails it.
Yeah.
But it's not about, becoming some kind of, digital hermit or anything like that. It's more about kind of understanding how our brain's reward system gets sort of hijacked by all the stimulation, and then figuring out how to reset that.
Right, like getting that refresh button.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can actually enjoy things that really matter, not just those pings and notifications.
Exactly. And what's really cool is the book doesn't just sort of throw you in the deep end. It offers these different detox options. So a full 48-hour one,
okay,
a 24-hour one, even partial detoxes.
Oh, okay.
So you can kind of find what works for you.
That's great.
Yeah.
That makes it seem a lot more approachable. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of those different detox types, let's break down what we're actually dealing with here.
Yeah.
Dopamine. What is it, and why is it kind of at the heart of this whole issue?
Well, so, you can think of dopamine as this molecule of more, right?
Okay.
So it's not inherently bad. It actually evolved to drive us towards essential things, like food and connection, even learning.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Right. But the problem is our modern world has really found all these ways to kind of exploit this.
I see. So it's not that dopamine is the bad guy here.
Right.
It's more like our environment is constantly triggering it in ways that aren't really helpful.
Exactly. Yeah. Things like all the notifications we get, right?
Oh, yeah.
Recommendations and this illusion of infinite options, especially I think in those open systems of social media.
Totally.
They're designed to keep us hooked. It's constantly triggering that anticipation of reward, the gotta have its feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Even if it's ultimately kind of meaningless.
Yeah. It's you should be doing something else, but there's this weird magnetic pull towards the next or the next comment or the next video.
Yeah.
Even though you're not really getting anything out of it.
Yeah, totally.
The author of the book actually talks about falling down this YouTube rabbit hole watching basketball videos.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not just, technology either, right? The book also kind of delves into food.
Okay.
Especially those packed with sugar and fat. They play on our innate cravings.
Yeah.
So while it might not be addiction, on the same level as, some drugs or whatever, the food industry definitely knows how to kind of push our buttons.
So we're living in this constant state of overstimulation.
Yeah.
We're bombarded by all these things that they're competing for our attention.
Right.
And the book argues that it makes it really hard to focus on things that actually matter. Totally. It creates this, this invisible barrier between us and the deep kind of focused work that's often so crucial for our long-term goals and really, fulfillment in life. It's
right.
We're on this hamster wheel of distractions, constantly checking email, scrolling through social media.
Oh, yeah.
Refreshing news feeds, never really fully present in what we're doing.
Yeah. And the book highlights these 4, sneaky tricks our minds kind of play.
Yeah.
To keep us in that cycle.
Yeah.
To keep us overstimulated. For example, we tell ourselves, oh, I can always get back to that task later.
Right.
Which we all know rarely happens.
Yeah. It's a recipe for procrastination for sure. What I found really interesting was the book's anecdote about Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Here's this tech genius who revolutionized how we interact with technology, yet he severely limited his own children's screen time. That really makes you think, right? If he recognized the potential dangers of this overstimulation, shouldn't we be taking it seriously too?
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so we've established kind of the problem here. It's this constant state of overstimulation that's really hijacking our focus, and it prevents us from engaging in meaningful work and activities.
Right.
But what's the solution?
Yeah.
How do we actually break free?
Well, that's where the dopamine detox comes in. And it's not about deprivation. It's more about consciously choosing what we allow to stimulate our reward system.
Okay.
And as I mentioned earlier, the book offers a few different approaches to this.
Let's dive into those different detox options, because I'm sure our listeners are curious what they actually entail.
Yeah.
First up, we've got the 48-hour complete detox, What does that involve?
So the 48-hour detox, that's the most intense option. For 2 full days, you abstain from anything that kind of triggers that dopamine rush.
Okay.
So that means no internet, no phones.
Oh, wow.
No movies, no music, except for like calming stuff.
Okay.
No sugary or processed food, no exercise, no drugs or alcohol. I know it sounds pretty intense.
Whoa, that does sound hardcore.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do for 48 hours straight with all of that off limits?
Well, the book suggests activities that encourage introspection and connection with yourself. So things like meditation, journaling, going on mindful walks, stretching, reading, non-stimulating material, things that kind of bring you back to the present moment without all the external noise.
So I think the author's anecdote about his friend who did this 10-day Vipassana retreat really helps put things in perspective. You're silent that whole time.
Oh, wow.
Can't even make eye contact with anybody. So suddenly 48 hours seems a little less daunting.
Right. It's all relative. Right. Now, if the full 48 hours feels too overwhelming, there's also the 24-hour detox, which follows the same principles, but, for a shorter duration.
Okay.
And even if you can't commit to a full day, the book really emphasizes that even a partial detox can have a huge impact.
That's encouraging. So it's not all or nothing. Even small targeted changes can make a difference.
Yeah.
Let's say someone's ready to give this dopamine detox a try.
Yeah.
What are the key steps to make it actually work?
Well, the book kind of breaks it down into this clear 3-step process. Okay. So first, you need to, identify your biggest distractions.
Okay.
And the author actually suggests making a cans list and a can'ts list.
I love that. It's about consciously deciding what you're allowing into your space.
Yes.
Physically and mentally. What comes next?
So the next step is all about adding friction.
Friction, like literally rubbing two things together.
Not quite, no. In this context, friction refers to making it harder to engage in those bad habits.
Okay.
And easier to engage in the good ones. So for example, if your phone is like your biggest distraction, you might, put it in another room, turn off all the notifications.
Right.
Maybe use an app to block certain websites.
So it's about creating those barriers that make it less effortless to fall into those dopamine traps.
Okay.
The book talks about the author putting his internet modem in his storage room.
Oh, wow.
To get online, he'd have to leave his apartment, go down several floors, open multiple doors. Talk about friction.
That's commitment.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And our brains are really wired to conserve energy.
Yeah.
Right. So if something takes a lot of effort, we're a lot less likely to do it. And on the flip side, you want to make those good habits as frictionless as possible.
Right.
So like if you're working on a passion project, like have everything set up and ready to go so there's just no excuse to procrastinate.
So we've identified our distractions, we've added friction. What's the final step to really making this detox work?
Okay, so the final step is all about timing. The book really stresses the importance of starting your detox first thing in the morning.
Oh, okay.
Before, that daily flood of stimulation begins.
It's like setting up a shield to protect your focus before the dopamine hijackers get to you.
Exactly. And the book suggests building a solid morning routine.
Right.
That kind of sets you up for a day of, focused, intentional living. And we can dive deeper into what that might look like in just a bit. So we've talked about, those different detox options and the 3 steps to successfully implement them. But what about the long game?
Yeah.
How do we maintain that sense of focus?
Right.
And avoid falling back into old habits once the detox is over?
Right. Because let's be real, like going back to our old ways is so easy.
Totally.
Especially when you consider how our environment is practically designed to pull us back in.
Absolutely. The book addresses this by offering several strategies to kind of help you stay on track. The first is simply being aware of your kind of personal relapse patterns.
Okay.
What are those triggers
that
tend to pull you back into that overstimulation, that feeling of restlessness, the urge to constantly check your phone? Recognizing those cues, that's crucial.
So it's about cultivating that mindfulness we talked about earlier.
Yes.
Like paying attention to our internal state.
Yeah.
And noticing those subtle shifts that might lead us astray.
And just as important, I think, is being kind to yourself when you do slip up. Because let's face it, it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And the book really emphasizes that beating yourself up just makes things worse.
instead of motivating you to get back on track, it just creates that like negative spiral of guilt and discouragement.
Totally. And it's important to remember that we're not operating in a vacuum, right?
Yep.
Like the world is constantly vying for our attention.
Oh, you're telling me. It sometimes feels like every app and website is in this like constant battle for our precious time.
And they've gotten incredibly sophisticated at it.
Yeah.
You think about, those recommended for your algorithms.
Oh, yeah.
They're like digital sirens constantly luring us.
Oh, man.
With that promise of the next dopamine hit.
It's almost insidious,
yeah.
Isn't it? It's not just that we're choosing to be distracted, but we're being like deliberately manipulated into this state of constant craving.
Yeah, I think so. That's why I really appreciate the book's emphasis on creating a contingency plan. Yeah. It's about anticipating those moments of weakness before they strike.
So it's about having a strategy already in place.
Yeah.
For those times when you find yourself, doom scrolling on social media.
Yeah, right.
Or just mindlessly refreshing your inbox.
You could say, if I find myself mindlessly scrolling,
right,
I'll immediately close the app and go for a walk. Or if I'm tempted to check email first thing in the morning, I'll leave my phone in another room and start my day with meditation instead.
I love those. It's like having these little circuit breakers in place to protect your focus.
Exactly. And it's about creating a system that's sustainable for the long haul.
Yeah.
The detox is great for hitting the reset button.
Right.
But it's those daily habits and preemptive strategies that'll really help you stay on track.
The book also talks about the importance of cultivating here and now neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really fascinating. Can you kind of elaborate on what those are?
Sure. So, as we discussed, dopamine is all about that anticipation of reward, that yearning for more. But there are other neurotransmitters, right? Like endorphins and oxytocin, serotonin, that are associated with being present in the moment.
Right.
Feeling calm, connected, content.
And the book suggests activities like meditation, stretching, and mindful walking.
Yes.
As ways to kind of boost those feel-good chemicals. Essentially anything that helps us ground ourselves in our bodies.
Exactly.
In the present moment.
Even simple things like, spending time with loved ones, engaging in deep conversation, or just enjoying a quiet moment in nature can have a really powerful impact on our well-being. It's about creating a lifestyle that naturally supports that, focus and contentment, rather than one that's constantly pulling us in a million different directions.
And it's not just about adding things to our routine, right?
Right.
The book also talks about the power of boredom.
Yes.
Which seems so counterintuitive.
It does.
In our always-on culture.
Yeah. Our brains are so accustomed to constant stimulation that simply allowing ourselves to be bored can feel almost radical.
Right.
But, it's often in those quiet spaces, those moments of stillness that we have our most creative breakthroughs and insights.
So it's about resisting that urge.
Yeah.
To immediately fill every spare moment with something to watch, listen to, or scroll through.
Absolutely.
Which is definitely a challenge.
It is a challenge, but it's one worth embracing. And the book encourages readers to think of this as like a 30-day challenge, committing to a daily routine that supports focus and presence.
Yeah.
For a whole month.
That's a great way to frame it. It makes it feel less overwhelming and more like a series of, manageable steps.
Exactly. And the idea is that over time, you're essentially like rewiring your brain.
Yeah.
You're training it to find joy and satisfaction in a more mindful, intentional way of living.
This has been a fantastic deep dive.
Yeah.
It's clear that this book offers this really practical roadmap for reclaiming our focus and attention in a world that's constantly vying for it.
And it goes beyond just, productivity hacks. It's really about understanding, I think, the neuroscience behind our behaviors and using that knowledge to make those conscious choices that support our well-being.
Well said.
Yeah.
And before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder, something that kind of builds upon what we've been discussing today. So we've talked about like the how-tos of this whole dopamine detox thing, right? Different types, the steps involved, the long-term strategies.
Yeah.
But it feels like there's a bigger question here, lurking beneath the surface.
It's not just about, getting more work done or resisting, the siren song of our smartphones. It's about reclaiming something I think really fundamental. Our agency. You know, in a world that's really designed to shape our desires and direct our attention, how do we become the conscious architects of our own lives?
That's a great way to put it. Are we choosing how we spend our time and energy?
Right.
Or are we letting algorithms and notifications dictate our every move?
Right. And beyond that, I think there's this deeper philosophical layer here that the book only kind of hints at. Like, what does it actually mean to live a truly fulfilling life?
Right.
If we're constantly chasing that next dopamine hit, you know, are we even really experiencing the richness of this present moment?
Right.
Can we even, you know, connect deeply with ourselves and the world around us when we're just, you know, caught in that cycle of craving an instant gratification?
This reminds me of something we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The power of boredom.
Yeah.
By resisting that urge to constantly fill every quiet moment with stimulation, we create space for reflection, for creativity, for genuine connection.
Absolutely. The dopamine detox, it's not just about, you know, productivity, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a gateway to a more intentional, fulfilling way of being.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating a different relationship, I think, with ourselves, with technology, with the very fabric of our experience.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
I
want to leave our listeners with a challenge. What one change inspired by this conversation will you experiment with this week?
Yeah.
What step can you take to reclaim your focus and start living more intentionally?
Maybe it's, you know, deleting a social media app.
Yeah.
Designing a distraction-free workspace.
Right.
Committing to, you know, a daily meditation practice. Even 10 minutes can make a difference. Or maybe it's just choosing to embrace boredom for a few moments each day, you know? Allowing yourself to simply be without that need for constant stimulation.
The point is to take action. Even a small shift, it can create ripple effects that you might not even anticipate. Start small, be consistent, and just see where this journey takes you. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of dopamine detox.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
We hope you found it insightful and, more importantly, that it inspires you to take back control of your attention and live a life that's truly aligned with your values. Until next time, happy focusing.
Yeah, and remember, the power to choose is always yours.